Well, of course, everything starts with short term because the data are generally will produce pretty reliable answers on short term effects. One of the reasons is that people tend to, if they react to marketing, they tend to react quickly. And so you tend to see the results in the same day, the same week, the same month, so relatively quickly after the experiments, or after the expenditure. Long-term results, of course, are important for strategic reasons. And I would make the distinction here between long-term results that you can infer from the data versus long-term results from which you need different metrics. So in the first category, I mean, a very standard example is if your work, if you can demonstrate that your marketing campaign leads to the acquisition of 100 customers, and these customers each spend $20, and so there's $2,000 of extra revenue. Okay. Now the question is, well, wait a minute. Are these customers only going to buy from us once? Hopefully they'll come back in the future. That you can derive from looking at the loyalty levels in the customer base. And so you can derive a long-term results from saying, okay, in the short term, we get the lift of $2,000, but you can probably multiply that by 2 or by 3 or 4, depending on your data, to say in the long run, we're going to get, let's say, $8,000 worth of revenue. And that completely changes, of course, the ROI. So that's a very, very good way to do it, so long as you're very careful to look at loyalty levels of customers in your business, which tends to depend more on the satisfaction with your product or service than other factors. So that's point one. And then point two, of course, are specialized metrics. You've alluded to one, that's brand health, brand awareness, brand equity, etc. Yes. And so if you have data on that, you could certainly take a look at whether or not your marketing helps your brand health indices. The challenge there is that data tends to not be collected very frequently. But I think with digital databases going the way we are, it seems to me that you can track probably on a weekly basis, maybe even better, how your brand is doing in the minds of customers by looking at these other variety of internet-based metrics. The question there then, if you believe that brand health, let's say, is a valid long-term method, which it is, but you do need to take a look at, well, what does that do for me, my company? So you do need at some point some sort of a conversion that says, well, if my brand health goes up by 10%, what does that mean for me financially? And we know something about that. We know something that I'm quoting the results from a couple of colleagues of mine who did a large study of hundreds of studies. So here's the consensus, that if your brand status goes up by 10%, your long-term financial results go up by about 3%. So that elasticity is about 0.3. So it's good, but careful. There are diminishing returns again. So if you are already 90% satisfaction levels, etc., that last 10% to 100% may not make that much difference. But we do have some very, very good instruments available now to infer that. And as I said, I just made the difference between those that you can infer yourself from the data versus those for which you need additional metrics.
I have a strong reservation, I guess we'll call it. I'm a big fan of understanding LTV. And that said, I have a strong reservation at trying to apply that to businesses that are not long-term. So if you have a durable contract with your customer, you have a pretty solid LTV with that. If on the other extreme, you have a new brand that has a large proportion of one and done customers, you really don't have much data to calculate a true LTV, probably looking at maybe a simple average. And okay, maybe this is the third mistake I'm citing here, and common mistake I've seen in marketing, is to take the CAC to LTV style of analysis and say, it costs me $100 to acquire this customer and they spend $100 on breaking even, but on average, they're going to spend this much more. When people are doing that type of analysis, what they're often omitting is how much of the paid media was required to get the customer to come back a second time. Again, if there's no contract, it's not purely email that's going to get them come back. It's not purely just the product quality, although you need both of those things. I posit that it's greater than zero, the amount of paid media needed to get all of those people to repeat purchase. And so you need to not only understand your CAC, but you need to understand your cost of your paid cost of retention.